Hello, I'm Tony Jordan with Olds College. We're in the welding shop today and I'm going to show you how to fabricate this exact welding table. So follow along and enjoy the video. Today we're going to start with a piece of 3/8 plate material that I have here, and we've cut these 3/8 plates with a dimension of 18 inches by 36 inches. We've cut ourselves, pre-cut 4 legs. They're angle iron legs that are cut to a length of about 28 inches, 28 3/8 inches. They're a 3" by 3" by 1/8 inch angle iron. On the bottom of those legs we've cut some 4x4 by 1/4 inch plate, little tablets, and we've just cut one corner off on the inside. This is a 3" channel iron. We've cut 2 pieces of this at 32 inches and 2 pieces of this at 14 inches. We've mitered the corners, and you'll notice that when we start to weld, I'll mention it again, we've mitered the corners so that we can actually put those corners together and have a nice finished surface on the outside. Things we'll need for the project, just basic tools, a tape measure, a piece of chalk, of course our MIG welder. We'll need a square, and we've also got a hammer available. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually start to construct the frame of this table right on the actual table that it's going to be a part of. We're going to basically put some welds on here and on the inside here, and we'll get this thing put together and we'll start squaring it up. For tacking purposes and to make sure everything's square, we want to place our tacks on the outside edges here. Tacks on the outside edges, we'll check for square first. We'll make sure that we're not over squared. Taking our square here, laying it inside this frame and checking here. We can see that our corner is now square, so we don't have a problem with it being out of square. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to place a tack here on this outside corner. So with that tack in place, I'm just going to check with a square again on the inside of that rail, and you can see from looking at the inside of here, it is a little out of square. There's space at the bottom of the square here, and it's tight at the top of the square. So we know that it's a little bit out of square. What we're going to do is we're going to take this inside of this, where it's out of square, I'm going to move this out so that this can come up against this side of this plate all the way up, just like so. Now I've got it square. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place another tack here that'll hold it square. Always make sure your tacks are just light, small tacks. If you get too heavy of a tack, it becomes hard to break or adjust if you need to. So I've tacked it lightly. I can see that it's square. Everything is fine there. One more tack on this bottom corner to ensure it stays. Now I'm going to tack up this other corner. So I want to line up my corner edges, take my square, and follow this exact same procedure. We now have our table frame basically constructed, and again 45-degree miters tacked all the way around so that we can actually see what we've done here. I'm not going to weld any on the top part of this frame. Otherwise, if I weld this, I'm just going to wind up grinding it off. I'm going to weld inside the frame, and later I'll weld on the outside edge of this. First off, on the inside, stepping across. On the bottom of this table where I've actually already tacked and then you've got some weld there, I'm going to weld just about out to the outside corner, not quite, because when I place my angle iron onto this table, it's going to be placed on at this kind of a setting. So I'm going to place that leg on the outside edge of this corner. When I do that, I want to make sure I don't have to grind off any weld and clean it up in that area. So I'm going to just weld out to the inside, out to the outside, not quite all the way, so I leave room to put this leg on without having to clean up a bunch of weld. Those are the welds on the bottom end of the table. What we're going to do from there is we're now going to take this and we can weld up the outside edges of the table. Basically, we're just going to step a nice weld onto there, run it across the bottom or across that edge, and just fill that outside edge. We will need to later take a grinder, clean that up. You don't want to have any sharp edges, and right now on this 45-degree miter, which forms the 90, we've got a real sharp edge on the outside corner of this table. That is a hazard. So we want to actually put the weld on there. We'll take a flapper disc or a grinder wheel to it and just clean it up and make a nice rounded edge. I want to just prep these sides that I've welded. I want to prep them with a grinder just to smooth them off and clean them up. And so this grinding disc, we're going to use it to just form up our edges. When you're grinding with a grinding disc, it's important to grind with this section of the wheel. When you're grinding with this section of the wheel on the face of the wheel rather than the edge, you smooth and polish. Grinding on the edge of the wheel, of course, cuts off the metal. So if you don't want a bunch of grinding marks on your steel, you just want to smooth and polish with that face of the wheel, that top quarter. Here we have a finished product when we're finished grinding. So what we've done is we've placed the weld in there, we've filled it up, that sharp corner that we had. We've now ground it off with our flapper wheel just to smooth it off so that if somebody touches that barehanded, they're not cutting themselves. Our next step, now that we've got the frame of the table built, we're going to mark out on our tabletop center. We're going to take this tabletop, place it onto the underside of the table. We'll take our tape measure. We know that it's 18 inches wide. So we want to have 2 inches. It's built to have 2 inches of overhang on each side of this width. So I'm going to measure in 2 inches from the edge here. And I'm going to do the same here. When I get that centered on the 2 inches there, it's also built to have 2 inches overhang on each end. So I'm going to measure that for 2 inches. And there it is. We now know that this frame is centered in the center of this tabletop. I'm ready to weld this frame to the tabletop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we call stitch welding, and I'm just going to do that staggered. So I'm going to place about a 2-inch stitch on this surface right here. Then I'm going to come to the inside of the table a little farther down, and I'm going to place another 2-inch stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing out here. So it's staggered in where it's sitting. I'm going to do that all the way around the table so I get the tabletop mounted down firmly. First, I'm going to just take one tack in this corner, just so that I know and I can make sure my tabletop is set properly on top of this frame. So now I can come across the table to the opposite corner and I can tack this side down. I'm going to put a tack in the middle so that when I weld from the one side, I don't get any bow in this that lifts this frame off my table. And one on the other side here as well. Now we're ready to weld. With this table, we want to ensure that we have a strong enough weld that if we're working on the top of this table and hammering or whatever we might find ourselves doing, that this weld isn't going to break. We want it to hold. Over to the inside for that finish through the center stitch, and then one across the top here as well. Now we're going to finish up with another weld over on this end. We're going to carry on and do that around the whole table, inside and out, so that we have this tabletop securely welded to the frame. So we take our legs, and these are our 3x3 by 1/8 angle iron. We're gonna, again, I've welded this out on this tabletop, not quite out to the corner, so that when I put this angle iron on here, it fits on here and sits flat. So I don't have to prep this edge. As you can see, I can set that on there, just out on the outside edge of that, and that's how that's gonna weld on. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to take my square and I'm going to check this angle iron on both sides, okay? Both edges of the leg, this edge and this back edge. When I check these, I'm checking for square. What I see here is this leg is actually leaning slightly in. So as it's leaning slightly in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this other side. It is square. So as it's leaning slightly in this way, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack this outside edge here in the back. That'll allow me to lift that leg slightly to square it and then put the tack on the front to hold it. There, I've got a light tack in place. I'm just going to check this with my square now, and I can actually move that back with my square and bend it so that it will stay in place just like so. It is now square. I'm going to place another tack on the inside of the leg now to hold it. Checking it again, just to be sure. It's good, it's square. Check this way, should still be square, yes it is. We're good to go. I'm going to do this with all of these legs. So the next thing I do is I take my next leg, I place it on there, making sure that I've got it at the outside edge. I'm going to take my square, I'm going to check for square on both these legs again. Once along the back, once along this side. Okay, that leg is relatively square. So I don't have to worry so much about squaring that, but what I am going to do is I'm going to place a tack on the inside of here. Remember with heat, when you weld and you tack, it tends to pull things out of square. So you want to check it again to make sure that it is square, which it is. We're still good to go. I'm going to place 2 tacks on this leg, one on the inside corner and one on the outside edge here, just to make sure that leg's secure. And that leg is now in place. Same with our other legs. Now we can weld it. I will be welding the inside of these angle irons and the outside of these angle irons. These are the legs. You don't want this thing to come crashing down on your toes. So you want to make sure the legs are on it good. So I'll weld the inside, the outside. Again, on the outside, we want to smooth it off with our paddle disc just to make sure that this thing is smoothed off and right, so nobody cuts themselves on it. I'll weld this up now. As you're welding up to the inside corner of an angle iron, when you're welding towards the inside of that corner right here, you may encounter a condition that's it's like arc blow. What that is where you have magnetic fields that set up in your steel, and you're going to wind up with your weld wanting to spit back at you, and it doesn't seem to want to weld into that corner properly. The trick for that is weld from one side into the corner, and then weld from the other outside edge into the corner. Trying to weld around the inside of a corner like that can often be tough to get that weld in there. Now I'm ready to turn this table over. So I'm going to take my plates now that I've cut for my feet. I'm going to take this mitered edge and place it on the inside. Take your hammer, you will need to tap your plates around a little bit. Again, this is a 3x3 angle iron, so 3-inch width leg on it, right here. And what I'm doing is I have a 4-inch by 4-inch plate. So I want to have a 1/2 inch sticking out each side. So I'm going to tap on the back corner here. And now I'm going to adjust my foot so that it's square in here. And there we have it, 1/2 inch. This foot is now in place. I'm going to do the same with the other 3 feet, just to make sure that I've got them right centered where I want them. What my next job will be to do on this table is to just get a welder on the outside of each foot. Too much weld is going to cause that foot to cup, and so we don't need a whole lot of weld. This is really just a downward pressure on this foot. So just enough to hold that foot on there is quite adequate. Now you can see what I've done here with my welds. All I've done really is I've put about 1 inch on the outside corners, so outside edges, and around this back corner I've gone around the corner about 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch on each side. Again, plenty to hold that foot onto the table. We're going to carry on and do that with the last 2 here. So that table is now welded up. What we suggest is that quite often when we take these tables and we prepare them after we've welded them and we clean them up, clean up with grinding and whatnot, is that we take a grinder and we buff along these edges, because these edges of this table are quite often very sharp. And so we buff them up, clean them up, round them a bit. We also recommend you grind on the edge of these corners and clean these corners up to make them so they're not sharp, because you're going to be working on this table quite regularly. That said, this table is complete, and there we have it. So we have another table, very stable, that you'll be able to work on for years to come in your shop at home. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching this, and thanks for watching, and enjoy your welding. I'm Tony Jordan with Olds College.